And thank you for giving me this opportunity just to share one little tidbit about my father. He began his polka show on WZAK in Cleveland, Ohio, not long after I was born. My first real memories are once I started school. Our father was on the air 34 hours a week. In the morning, I woke up, there were polkas playing. In the afternoon, I came home from school, there were polkas playing. Saturday, Sunday, always polkas playing in our house. And in two of our homes, our father had a recording studio where he broadcast his shows from. To me, that just seemed very normal. Everybody has a studio in their house. On Saturdays, when I would clean the studio, I would play polka records on his turntable. My favorite was always Eddie Blazonczyk, It's a Blue, Blue Day, because it's very dramatic when you have to clean and you're a teenager. So that was my polka of choice, was always that one. The studio, I must mention, was called AZZ Studios, and it was in honor of my father, Anthony, and our mother, Zebrowski. So during those early years, being the youngest, I did not understand the magnitude or influence that our father had. He was well recognized everywhere we went. To be honest, he was really hard on us. He was a larger man, and at any events, my father wore a shiny sequin jacket, a ruffled tuxedo shirt, or in parades, he would have a traditional Polish vest and a red hat with a single peacock feather. You could not miss him. And what really sticks with me is when we would be in a supermarket and someone would recognize him without having any of the flashiness about him. He would stop and talk to everyone about his love for polkas, the love of his family, his love of Poland, and his love of America. Always with a smile, and always with a joke. If you were not fortunate to have ever met or heard my father speak, he was not quiet. And it was very loud, and it was very infectious when he would speak and talk with everyone. As a family, it was all of us who participated in the show. My oldest brother, Tony, DJ'd some of the shows in the afternoon. I was really little, I don't remember the years, sorry. My sisters and I, we all recorded commercials and went to events with him. When I would do a 60-second spot, I would get it done in 30 seconds. And I would have to do it over and over again, and he would say, Basha, talk slower. So I hope I'm doing him proud and talking slow enough here for you. Because when I first read the speech to Bob, I was done in like a minute and a half, and it was like, that's not gonna work. In grade school, I can remember bringing home safety rules. Your basic safety rules, honor your mother and father. Within a few minutes, he called me over and he said, I should read these safety rules. Richie, come read these safety rules. And Richie and I recorded a PSA that my father played for years. Only one on a bike, it's unsafe for two. It's the rule that's the biggest in my head. So during that time, I wasn't aware of my father's past prior to me being born. I didn't know he had a polka program in the 50s with my oldest sister, Sophie. I knew my father played accordion, but I didn't know he had recorded a 78 album, just a 78. And he performed that with the Polish Sweetheart Orchestra, with my father playing accordion on it. And Richie actually just recently found it on YouTube and had that posted on Facebook, which was really very cool to hear. In November of 1979, while our father was on air, he suffered a heart attack and passed away. And so, again, at the time, I just didn't understand what his legacy meant and what it could mean. I didn't realize that then there are 8 children, 6 of us met our spouses through polka. Most especially me. I didn't know that I could meet a friend at 10 years old at a polka dance, and 50 years later, she's still my best friend. I didn't know my son Ben when Richie accepted previous award from my dad at age 15 said, I'm going to have a polka show. And then went on to have a polka show at his university, and now he has a show, the Wonky Show, the favorite food I make him on Polish Radio. So to me, those legacies were our family's legacies. But I didn't understand, and I still don't understand, what the magnitude of his legacy is in the Polka field. It doesn't really matter where I go. When someone finds out who my father is, the memories that they share. They share his jokes, the rooster crowing, the polka music, his sequin jackets. They share his ending message where he would say, and I'm trying to remember the words and I can't exactly, but it didn't matter what church you went into. It didn't matter what you believed. You should be kind to every person. And I hope and I pray that I'm living up to that memory of his. So I really want to thank the International Polka Station for this honor of our father. And I'm going to do this before I get that. So I know there's a lot of confusion as to whether it's Richie's sister or Asha's brother. Now, I was going to have a raise of hands and a poll, but I'm not going to do that. But I must say that I'm truly honored to always be the daughter of my father and my mother, and I'm truly honored to be Richie's one and only baby sister. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to present the award to Richie on behalf of our family.
All right. Nice job, Asha. All right, before I go any further, Madam President, I want to make sure I understand this. There are 6 of the children here. We all get 10 minutes on the microphone, is that correct? Okay. All right, well, welcome everyone. And in the spirit of keeping things moving, I just want to, obviously congratulate the inductees today and also coming up a little later, all the award winners. And thank everyone in attendance for coming here today. We've actually looked forward to this day for years. And so when we found out that the honor was happening this year, I immediately took a pen and tried to put down all the things that I wanted to say on behalf of my family. And I thought I wrote the perfect acceptance speech. And then I read it 2 or 3 days later, and I said, that's not good, not good. So last night I was in the hall, and I thought to myself, I'm surrounded by some of the greatest speakers in the polka industry. So I went up and put a little word in everybody's ear that I thought might be able to help me. And I said, hey, do me a favor. I said, could you maybe help me out with a little speech? I said, leave it at the front desk, and I'll pick it up in the morning. Just put a little quick note on it, so, because I'm not going to have a lot of time. And of course, I just walked up to some, like I said, some of the greatest speakers we have here. Of course, Jimmy Weber. I went up to him and said, hey, could you put together a speech? And he said, yeah. So I go to the front desk and, I look at it and I said, no, what is this? He says, guaranteed to be funny. This is some of my best material. And if you want, I can get Joe to call in. Okay, I went in that pile. Then of course, Mitch gets up. I thought to myself, well, there's a man that's certainly going to save me, And Mitch just says, I promise this will be very short. And there will be nothing inappropriate in it. You can say everything I wrote. And then I went a little further north across the border there to Panguda, and he wrote this in Polish, but basically it said, Bishop, trust me, there's nothing bad in here. Right. And then I went to Mark Chepach, and he wrote on, he says, sure, I got nothing better to do, and there won't be any sarcasm. And there's something similar with Billy Belina, but he said, oh no, no complaints at all, it's beautiful. All right, so I'm on my own. Thanks for nothing, guys. I appreciate all your effort. So Basha made a point of telling you that when she was growing up, she thought that was normal. That that's just what you did because we were all around her. And if there's anything about my father's history, is that it's not normal. And he had an extraordinary life. So from his very beginning, he was born in 1925 in Bayonne, New Jersey. And his parents were Polish citizens, and they happened to be in the U.S. when he was born. I don't know why that happened, if that was by design or just by chance. But he was born there, and before his second birthday, they all moved back to Poland. And he was raised in Poland, as my mother was. She was a Polish citizen of Polish parents. And they were in the Białystok region of Poland. And once again, the extraordinary happened. You know, he was there, they moved back to Poland in 1927. And so life was well, everything went as should be. You know, they lived in a rural area, they were farm families and stuff. And then 1939 rolls around. And in September of 1939, that's when Poland was invaded, and the country ceased to exist under the Polish name. Germany took half, Russia took half. Well, about that time, both of my parents were 14 years old. And so for their entire teenage years, they lived in a war-torn country, Poland. Very similar to what we see in Ukraine today. And that is how their development years, their years as teenagers, went. And you would think that that would have an awful effect on people. And I think it had the exact opposite. So my father developed this love and pride for Poland, and it never left him. And he was an American citizen, but he was raised in Poland, and he was Polish. And as was my mother. Now you can imagine the different things that happened at that time because of war. A lot of it was very, very sad, but they endured. And in 1945, they were married. And that's the same year that the war ended, or technically ended in Poland. And they were married on April 1st, of the irony of that. So, shortly after that, my oldest sister, Zosia, was born. She was born in 1946. And then not too long after that, my father decided that he wanted to bring the family to the United States. So he left on a boat, a ship. And then part of his passage was paid by him playing organ for Polish masses. And I think to myself, that's his first day as a professional entertainer. So in 1947, he gets on a ship, promising to send for my mother and my sister Zosia. Unknown to them, my mother was pregnant with my brother Tony. So my mother, on her own in Poland, had a second child to her husband, who's in another country. And you have to imagine, you know, back then, communication is not what it was, or was not what it is today. So you couldn't call. If they were lucky, they could go to a town and maybe get a phone, but that wasn't going to happen. So she waited to get word for him to send for her. And so he finally, you know, he worked some jobs. Oh, by the way, he lived out in the East Coast when he came back to the United States. So he got some money together, sent for her. So now my mother and her two children come back to the United States. No one speaks English at this point. So they, excuse me. I got $7 worth now. Anyway, so they come to the United States, and none of them spoke English. So once again, an extraordinary beginning for our family. So in 1948 to 1951, my father and my mother and my brother and sister remained in the New York area, where my father started trying to figure out what he wanted to do for a career. And he worked in various jobs. He was on the radio. He was a musician, as they said. He played accordion, violin, keyboard. And so life went on. You know, they did what they had to do. And in 1951, they moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And I believe that's when it started to click for him what he was going to do, what his real calling was. And his calling was to be a promoter of polka music in Poland. He loved Poland. There's just no two ways about it. So it was an obvious fit. He loved polka music. He spoke fluent Polish, raised in Poland. And so his career began. And he began on some smaller AM radio stations in Cleveland. And as the children were born into our family, they were recruited to be on the radio, like Basha said. You know, everybody did their turn. So by 1963, he made his big move to an FM radio station in Cleveland called WZAK. Now, I'm looking around the room, and a lot of folks in here can remember what 1963 was, 63 through the end of 79. A lot of younger people, you can only imagine what it would be like. Right? And just so you're in the right frame of mind, there's no internet, there's no cell phone, there's no email. You can't duplicate a recording if you want to listen to it. There were albums that were coming around. So if you wanted to hear polka music, you had a couple of choices. You went to a polka dance, or you listened to a radio station, or you had a phonograph player, and that was it. So our industry relied heavily on the polka DJs that were around at the time. And that's where he started to shine. He developed a huge following in the Cleveland area. So much to the point where the different record companies, Beller obviously at the top of the list, WRS, Chet Schaefer, you can go down the list. My father would receive these recordings and he'd listen to them. And if he played them on the radio and he thought they were good and said they were good, people in the area agreed. They said, they gotta be good. A.W. Zebrowski's playing on the radio. And then he would announce a dance that's coming up, and the place would be jammed. And people would say, well, how'd you hear about it? Oh, we listened to Tony's Polkas, Tony's program, things like that. So he, and DJs like him, but I think he was probably the biggest and best at what he did, were responsible for bringing polka music from other parts of the country to the Cleveland market in the Cleveland area. And also developing a whole generation and then following generations of polka lovers. And that's what he did. And he did it unlike anyone else. I look back and Basha made mention about my brother Tony, who did a program. My sister Manisha, she also did a program for the afternoon. At one point, my dad hired Joe Baritis to do the program, and Joe did that. Joe Baritis also got his start in polka music because of my father. And so many people like that we think about today who are in critical positions got their start because they were directly influenced by my father. So I'd like to tell you a quick little story that kind of illustrates this. Back in the 1970s, there was a young man from Cleveland, Ohio, and he decided that he wanted to go on and become a priest. So he went to college, and as he was in college, he, very much like my nephew Ben, started a polka program. And he was doing that while he was in college. So he graduated from seminary about the same time my father passed away. And then he moved away. Well, around that time, I moved away as well. I joined the service. I left for a few years. When I came back, I relocated to Pennsylvania. And I was introduced to this priest at this time. He was an ordained priest. And we got to talking, and he's like, I grew up in Cleveland. He said, I used to listen to an A.W. Zebrowski on the radio. Is that related to you? And I said, well, yeah. I said, that's my father. He says, oh, yeah. He said, I remember that. He says, matter of fact, he said, a lot of the things I do in my program are tailored after what your dad did. My father always had a prayer during his program. He had theme songs that he did at the beginning and the end. And this priest who I'm talking to, he's telling me all these stories. I said, well, that's really nice, And our friendship developed, and we got to become very good friends. So one day, I'm not sure where the conversation came up. He said, your father recorded on 78, didn't he? And I said, yeah, he did. He said, do you have one of those? And I said, you know what? I do, but in one of my moves, it was destroyed, and it was just shattered. He said, oh, that's too bad. And I said, yeah, I know. That's too bad. So as I said, he was a Polish priest, polka priest, and back then, most of the churches had a lot of festivals, and we go and play. So I'd run into him, periodically. On one of my visits, he said, didn't you tell me that your father's 78 was destroyed? And I said, yeah. I said, it really, the only copy that I knew that's still in existence. He said, when I was a teenager, your dad had a contest on the radio. And you had to call in, and if you had the correct answer, you won a prize. He said, well, guess what that prize was? And I said, I don't know. He said, it was a 78. Here it was, the exact 78. Now his, I'm ashamed to say, was in much better condition than mine. So he gifted it to me and said that this is probably something that our family would love. So I took it with just open arms. This one now I have it. It's never gonna get damaged. You would not believe this, but that priest is Father Bogusz. IPA chaplain. So, the reason I tell that story, one, it's just a beautiful story about the human nature, but also the influence that Basha said she doesn't understand I've witnessed, I've seen it. I've been in this industry for 50 years almost, and I've talked to countless people, and I know the impact he had. The musicians that are here today because they heard music on his radio show. The officers in the IPA and all of the volunteers in the IPA and other organizations, USPA, CPA, they grew up listening to his program and they developed the same love for polka music. So there's no doubt in my mind that it was a direct influence of what he did all the years on the radio. And that has been a positive effect for all of us to enjoy what we do today. So I'd like to close out in the spirit of keeping things moving. One more thing. You know, our father was inducted in the pioneer category, which is a little different voting than the traditional induction. But I looked it up to find out what the exact definition of pioneer was. And I think this fits in perfectly. It's that a person who begins or helps develop something new and prepares the way for others to follow. And I think we're all following. Wow. We're all here today following in what we love, polka music. So, thank you.